Hello everyone, I'm Carlos Gimson and today I'll give you a walkthrough on how to do the assignment for the topic Business Value of Information Technology for the class HAP 360. Just a small technical information, this assignment was done using the Microsoft Excel version 16. So here's a screenshot of the assignment where we are given data from the Office of Information from the Department of Veterans Affairs. The data includes the budget, the numbers of electronic health records, and the cost per patient index for the fiscal years listed on the left. Below the data are the questions we need to solve for, which includes calculating the correlations between the index on cost of care per patient, number of records in the EHR systems, and the budget of the Office of Information. The second question or thing to do is to provide a scatter plot for the relationship of the budget of the Office of Information and the cost of care. And lastly, we have to figure out which came first, whether the increase in budget leading to better cost of care or vice versa. So the first thing to do is we have to copy the data from the web page and paste it on an Excel spreadsheet. Now it is possible to do that, just copy and paste it, but when you are copying the values for the budget and the number of records, be sure that you either manually enter the data or remove the commas, because with the commas being there, they lead to data type errors, which basically Excel won't calculate for it. Once we've copied the data to an Excel spreadsheet, we're going to calculate for the correlations. But first, what is a correlation? Basically, the correlation determines whether the value of one variable is related to the value of another variable. Now, the strength of the correlation is calculated and is represented by the correlation coefficient represented by the variable r. And the correlation coefficients ranges from -1 to +1. Now for this homework, we're going to use the correlation function that's available in Excel. So to calculate the correlations, you need to first create a chart somewhere on your existing spreadsheet. I added mine below the existing data. To calculate the correlations, you use the correlation function in Excel, like mentioned earlier. And to the right, you can see the correlation function I used. The correlation function requires two arrays of information. So for the first correlation, which is between the budget and the number of records, I use the correlation function, and I use the array of number of records, which is C3 to C9 in my case, followed by the array of budgets, which is B3 to B9. Now it calculated to a coefficient of 0.764. Next is the correlation of budget and cost index, which is calculated by having the correlation function and then the array of budget first, followed by the cost index, that's B3 to B9 and then D3 to D9 in my case. And it calculates the correlation coefficient of 0.892. And lastly, I need to calculate for the correlation coefficient between the number of records and cost index. So in my case, I gathered the correlation with the first set of records from D3 to D9 and C3 to C9, and now the next activity is we need to create a scatter plot. So to create a scatter plot, we first have to highlight the information required. In this case, we need a scatter plot for the budget and cost index, which is highlighted here. In my case, it's column B and column D. Once they are highlighted, you have to click on Insert at the top left of Excel. Then click on a smaller icon for scatter plots and specifically click the scatter plot design. And it's going to give you a not very visually appealing chart, but we can actually fix that. So for this, as you can see, there's a huge space to the left. So to fix that, I right-clicked on the data for the horizontal data, and then I clicked on Format Axis. From there, you can change the minimum bounds. I changed mine to 100 million, and I also added display units to millions down here at the bottom. and it actually gives you a better looking chart at this point. But as you can see, there's still some information missing. So to modify that, you click on chart design at the top right, and then click on the quick layouts at the top left, and then click the third layout with the linear design. Then from there, you can see this final scatter plot. And also you can add information such as the names for the X and Y axis just by clicking on the names for cost index and budget, and then replacing them with the names that matches the axis. After creating the final this scatter plot, we can answer the question of what came first, whether it was the IT investment or the changes in cost of care. Now, to actually answer this, we will need to calculate for the vanishing partial coefficients. Now, that coefficient, basically, we're going to calculate two of them, and whichever is closer to zero means that that model is more likely to occur. For our specific case, we have two models that we're looking at. One is that the first is that a higher budget will mean a better electronic health record system, which means more records, and that improves the cost index. The second model is that by having a better cost index, we actually get more budget for the hospital, which leads to a better healthcare system and thus more health records. To calculate the partial coefficient of the first model, we first multiply the correlation coefficient of the budget and number of records by the correlation coefficient of the cost index and number of records. We then subtract it by the correlation coefficient of the budget and cost index. So with the chart that I'm using, I calculated by multiplying B14 and C15 and then subtracting C14. So that comes up with a correlation or partial coefficient of negative 0.459. Now to calculate the partial coefficient of the second model, we first get the product of the correlation coefficients of the budget and cost index and the budget and number of records, and then subtract the correlation coefficient of the cost index and number of records. And that calculates to a partial coefficient of 0.116. Now, this basically means that the second model, 0.116, which is closer to zero, is more likely to occur. And that's the end of the assignment walkthrough. I hope it answers some of the questions you guys had regarding the assignments. Calculates to a correlation coefficient of 0.566. Now, what does this all mean? It basically means that there's a strong correlation between budget and cost index, meaning that if the budget increases, the cost index actually improves.